Hello book lovers of the internet, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be doing a book review of a bit of a hefty book called The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. So perhaps you've heard of this musician who was previously the drummer to the Nirvana band and then became the lead singer, the guitarist, and also the drummer for his own band called the Foo Fighters. So I gave this 5 stars when I read it about a year ago now, beginning of last year I believe, and it was a very good start to my reading year actually, because it was more than just a journey, it was also an inspiration. So I am going to be taking a look at my Goodreads review since it's been some time, and once I'm finished with that I'm going to take a look at some 1-star reviews to see whether I could justify any of their comments or not. But first let's move on with my own thoughts. So in some reviews I also read that the audiobook is an even better experience, and I certainly have no doubt about this because it is actually narrated by Dave himself, and he has quite a majestic voice even when it comes to singing, of course. So I can imagine that the audiobook would be even better than reading it in your own mind, but having a great imagination and also so many voices in my head helped thoroughly. So kind of a similar experiences because I could sort of emulate Grohl's voice when it came to reading this autobiography. And considering that it's quite a thick book, it's also a relatively quick read despite its length, since Dave truly knows how to paint a picture, and he also managed to fascinate me with each chapter consecutively. There are some chapters which obviously stood out more to me than others, such as the one where he discussed Kurt Cobain's death, because he was his best friend, and later on in the same year Taylor Hawkins died, one of his other best friends, so that was absolutely heartbreaking for him, and I could really empathize considering how much he'd already been through. So next is I felt as though I was there with him while reading this book and listening to him rather than reading what he had to say, as though I was sitting in the same room with Grohl narrating his life very systematically, orderly fashion. So I am very happy that I got to know about the band Foo Fighters about 5 years ago from my father's colleague, and I have also been following them on social media ever since, especially YouTube, but more recently Instagram as well and Twitter. And I later got to know about Nirvana, and through this book I discovered famous bands such as Cream, 9 Inch Nails, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and so many others which I've been listening to consistently since I finished reading this book, and also while simultaneously reading this book. So it took me a while to get through, despite being a quick read. So as I've mentioned, I was reading about a chapter or two every evening, since the chapters are quite long and very descriptive at parts. So Dave has certainly lived his life to the fullest, and he faces every experience with a grin. And I would love to someday attend one of his concerts and also meet him backstage, as doubtlessly so many others do. So last year I almost had the opportunity to go to the Taylor Hawkins tribute concert in September I believe, but I didn't manage to buy the ticket, so that was a bit of a missed opportunity, and I still regret not being able to have done that, but I believe that one of these days I'll be able to visit a place where he's going to perform and meet him in person. So Dave is the sort of guy who is determined and also takes risks all the time. He also hopes for the best despite the negative parts of his life he's been through. He is also optimistic and has his priorities in check, as it turns out through this book, and in this order specifically: family, music, and then his friends. So the included pictures are all great, and Grohl's systematic behavior truly intrigues me considering the life he lived with all its ups and downs. And I am certain that he learned a lot through his experiences, as everybody truly does. However, he's been in the spotlight, sometimes unwillingly, far longer than most, and his humility is a factor which has always drawn me in. So my final paragraph, and I think I've already mentioned this, was how the saddest chapter was by far how he explained Kurt Cobain's passing, and I resonate with Cobain, and his death in writing was extremely painful. I also obviously can understand what he was going through at the time, and some people say that he didn't actually kill himself, but he was killed by his wife, Courtney Love, so it was quite excruciating. And even though I wasn't born yet when the musical genius is said to have killed himself in 1994, it was still quite a painful experience to read this chapter. So one more thing that struck me about Dave Grohl is that despite having lost many friends and acquaintances throughout his career, and that the fact that these certainly left their mark on the musician, he still persisted and also engaged with what he'd learned from his experiences in his songs. And finally, before we move on to the one-star reviews, I especially loved how he describes and merges experiences from his present with those of the past, and then returns to the present to manage to bind the chapter in a fine knot, ultimately linking all his points together before then going on to move on to the next chapter. So this is the first one star I'm seeing up here, and you can probably see it as well. It is by this author, apparently, author of one book called Lee Prescott. So he says this, I think you can see what he says here as well, but I'll just read it just for you to know what he has in mind. How to write an autobiography without revealing anything of yourself, apart from perhaps what you think people want to read to see you in a good light. It didn't work for me. I just can't believe some of rock's greatest hell-raisers are all sweetness and light. So firstly, I don't think that Dave Grohl is that sort of person. He did manage to mention all of his ups and downs, when he was frustrated, when he had a nervous breakdown, when he was angry. He really captured all his emotions well, in my opinion, so I don't think this is justified. And add that to the rather saccharine dull anecdotes, really poor writing, and the block capital inner dialogue, this rolled up to a major disappointment. Listen to The Pretender a few hundred times instead. Grohl's music is infinitely better than his writing. So while I do think that Grohl's music is fantastic and his lyrics are great and his singing is also brilliant, I wouldn't say that it is infinitely better than his writing, because I don't think I'd have been able to finish the entire book had his writing style truly been boring. So it would have probably ended up on a shelf, on a TBR shelf for ages, or on a currently reading shelf, without any hopes of escaping there. And he does mention when he's mad, so he does mention his ups and downs, as I've said, and he does explain a lot about himself. I feel as though this autobiography is quite a personal one. Next is by Liam O'Toole. Okay, this book reads like Dave beefed up his boring as vanilla and self-proclaimed sheepish narrative with the reckless use of a thesaurus. It's crazy how every famous celebrity he meets was his childhood idol. Okay, so it's so soft and cheesy it makes the Foo Fighters sound like a heavy rock band. So, I mean, it is obvious that Dave Grohl is going to have a lot of idols, since he had the opportunity to meet so many, and they shaped him to become such a great songwriter, so it's obvious that he's going to look up to so many famous artists. And finally, this one over here by Fraser Simons pretty much confirms that my interest in celebrity memoirs only applies if I know who they are, because boy do I not care at all about this book. DNF at 20% and be invested or move on if you want my advice. So he gave it 1 star because he doesn't know who Dave Grohl is, and people recommended that he should read the book because it's written well. So my advice would have been not to, if he doesn't really understand who Dave Grohl is, and it's quite obvious that he's not going to enjoy a book by a person he doesn't know anything about. Much like I'm not enjoying the book Educated by Tara Westover. So anyway, that's all I had to say about Dave Grohl's The Storyteller. So if you have anything to add, please do let me know in the comment section, and I'll be glad to reply to all of them. So this is a book I'm very passionate about, if you can't tell, so try to be kind in your words, or critical at best. at worst, I mean. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye, guys.